There's a powder that has been killing insects without a single drop of poison for 30 million years, and the $65 billion pesticide industry has spent decades making absolutely certain you never learn its name. Not because it is exotic or difficult to find, because a bag of it costs less than a fast food meal, lasts for years without losing a single percent of its effectiveness, and eliminates every crawling insect in your home more thoroughly than any chemical spray your exterminator carries in his truck. Cockroaches, bedbugs, fleas, ants, termites, silverfish, ticks, every single one, destroyed by a mechanism so ancient and so simple that no laboratory on Earth can improve on it or patent it. That is the problem. That is always the problem. The moment a solution exists that anyone can buy once and use forever, the industry built on selling you the same product every 30 days faces an existential question. And the answer that industry chose was not to compete. It was to make you forget the alternative existed at all. Stay with me, because what this powder is and what it does at a microscopic level will permanently change how you think about every can of chemical spray under your kitchen sink. The substance comes from ancient lake beds. Millions of years ago, microscopic aquatic organisms called diatoms lived in freshwater environments across every continent on Earth. These organisms built their cell walls from silica, essentially biological glass. When they died, their glass shells accumulated at the bottom of lakes and rivers over geological time, compressing into thick, white, chalky deposits that look and feel like fine flour. In 1837, a German laborer drilling a well outside Hanover hit a soft white layer 9 meters underground. He thought he had struck chalk. Scientists who examined it under early microscopes found something that had no precedent in agricultural or medical literature at the time. Every single particle was covered in edges so sharp and so fine that they were invisible to the naked eye, yet large enough to slice through the protective coating of an insect body on contact. The material was named diatomaceous earth, and within decades of its discovery, farmers across northern Europe were using it to protect grain storage from the weevils and beetles that destroyed entire harvests every season. No chemical compound, no toxic residue, no environmental contamination. Ancient glass doing what it had done for 30 million years, cutting through anything soft enough to be cut. And this is where it gets serious, because the application history of this powder is not some obscure footnote from agricultural science. It is a documented, continuous thread running through military history, public health records, and government agricultural bulletins across more than a century and a half of use. Allied soldiers in the trenches of the First World War dusted their uniforms and sleeping areas with this powder to eliminate body lice within 48 hours. Lice that carried typhus fever, a disease that killed more soldiers in certain campaigns than enemy fire. Military field manuals from 1917 listed it as the primary recommended method for insect control in field conditions precisely because it weighed almost nothing, cost almost nothing, and worked in every climate without degrading. American grain farmers through the 1920s and 30s protected wheat silos across the Midwest with it routinely, and the United States Department of Agriculture published multiple field reports confirming its effectiveness against stored grain pests without chemical contamination. Indigenous communities across North America used mineral dusts for pest management long before any European scientists published a single paper on the subject. This knowledge was ancient, field-tested across generations, and completely free from any dependency on manufactured inputs. That last fact is the one that eventually made it inconvenient. If this is hitting different from everything you have ever heard about pest control, subscribe to Hidden Hacks right now, because this is exactly the kind of buried information we dig up every week. Now let's talk about the mechanism, because understanding what diatomaceous earth actually does to an insect at the physical level is what makes the pesticide industry's response to it so revealing. A A University of British Columbia study in 2003 placed diatomaceous earth particles under an electron microscope and measured the cutting edges on individual grains. The edges measure between 2 and 10 micrometers in size. A human red blood cell is approximately 7 micrometers in diameter. These edges are operating at a scale smaller than your own blood cells. When a cockroach walks across a surface dusted with this powder, the particles attach to the joints and underbelly of the insect where the exoskeleton is thinnest. The razor geometry of each particle begins slicing through the waxy lipid layer that seals moisture inside the insect's body. The insect does not die from any toxic compound entering its system. It dies from dehydration, as thousands of microscopic cuts drain the moisture from its body faster than it can be replaced. There is no neurotoxin involved. There is no chemical disruption of the nervous system. There is no residue that lingers on your kitchen surfaces, migrates into your food, or accumulates in the tissue of your children or pets. It is purely physical. A 2009 study published in a peer-reviewed entomology journal tested food-grade diatomaceous earth specifically against German cockroaches under controlled conditions. The mortality rate after 14 days reached 97.3%. No consumer chemical pesticide on the market consistently produces that result. Rutgers university researchers testing it against bedbugs in 2014 documented complete colony collapse within 3 weeks of exposure. Kansas State University field trials recorded a 92% flea kill rate within 10 days. Against ants, the timeline shortens because their smaller body mass loses moisture faster. Most ant species in contact with this powder die within 12 to 24 hours. Termites, responsible for over $5 billion in property damage across the United States annually, cannot survive sustained exposure to diatomaceous earth barriers. The numbers are not close. They are not competitive. They are the kind of results that should have ended the synthetic pesticide era before it fully began. This is the part most people miss, and it is the part that explains everything about why you are only learning this now. The global pesticide industry generates over $65 billion in annual revenue. That number rests entirely on one engineering requirement. The products must stop working. Chemical pesticide formulations are designed with degradation built into their life cycle. Active compounds break down within weeks or months, depending on the formula, the surface, and environmental conditions. That degradation is not a flaw. It is the business model. A product that stops working is a product you purchase again, every season, every year, for the rest of your life as a homeowner. Diatomaceous earth does not degrade indoors. It does not lose potency. It does not expire. A sealed bag stored in a dry container remains fully effective for decades because its mechanism is not chemistry. It is geometry. The edges do not dull. The structure does not break down. The silica that formed over 30 million years does not become less sharp because a few seasons have passed. You cannot patent a 30-million-year-old geological deposit. You cannot create a proprietary formula around ancient lake sediment. You cannot build a recurring purchase model around a product that functions indefinitely from a single application. The entire financial architecture of the pesticide industry requires that this powder not become common knowledge. So the industry did not compete with it. It regulated it into obscurity. In the European Union, selling diatomaceous earth, specifically as a pesticide, requires registration under the Biocidal Products Regulation, a process that costs hundreds of thousands of euros and takes years to complete. Small producers cannot afford the registration. So the product disappears from shelves not because a regulatory body found evidence of harm, but because the barrier to market entry is deliberately set at a height that eliminates competition from low-cost alternatives. 24 countries restrict or prohibit its sale as a household insect control product. The United States Food and Drug Administration, meanwhile, classifies food-grade diatomaceous earth as generally recognized as safe for human consumption. It is used as an anti-caking agent in grain storage and animal feed worldwide. The same substance that 24 governments restrict as a pesticide is simultaneously approved for direct contact with the food supply. That contradiction does not reflect scientific risk assessment. It reflects regulatory capture. Like this video, if nobody in your life has ever explained this to you before, because this is what Hidden Hacks is built to uncover. Now let's talk about what this actually means for your home and your wallet, because the practical math here is something the pest control industry works very hard to keep you from calculating. The average American household spends between $400 and $900 per year on pest control, split between store-bought chemical sprays and professional exterminator visits. A professional treatment runs between $200 and $400 per appointment. Most exterminator contracts involve 3 to 4 visits annually. That is $800 to $1,600 per year to manage a problem rather than solve it. A 4-pound bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth costs between $8 and $12 at most hardware stores or online retailers and treats an entire average house with enough material left for multiple reapplications across the entire year. The cost reduction from switching is not 10%. It is not 50%. It is over 95%. And unlike a chemical treatment that begins losing effectiveness within weeks, the diatomaceous earth you apply in the wall gaps and cabinet spaces in January is still working in November without a single additional purchase. Here is exactly how to use it correctly, because this is where most of the limited information you can find online fails you at the critical moment. Application technique determines everything. Buy food-grade diatomaceous earth only. The bag must specifically say food grade on the label. Do not purchase pool-grade diatomaceous earth under any circumstances. Pool-grade material is heat-treated during processing, which converts the amorphous silica into crystalline silica, a form that damages lung tissue with repeated inhalation. Food grade contains less than 1% crystalline silica and is safe for indoor home use. Invest $5 in a rubber bulb duster applicator. It gives you precise control over the amount of powder you deploy. This matters more than most people realize. Pull your refrigerator away from the wall and apply a thin, barely visible line of powder along the baseboard behind it. The same line goes behind your stove, under your sink, inside every cabinet space where plumbing pipes enter the wall. Insects navigate your home along walls in darkness. These are their travel corridors. Disrupting those corridors with a thin powder barrier is more effective than spraying surfaces they only contact occasionally. In the bathroom, dust the baseboard around the toilet base, behind the vanity cabinet, and along the tub perimeter where moisture accumulates and attracts insect activity. For bed bugs, remove the mattress and apply powder into the joints of the bed frame, the crevices along the headboard, and along carpet edges at every wall. For ant entry points, trace their trail back to the precise location where they enter your home and lay a barrier line across that threshold. The single most common mistake people make is applying too much powder. If you can see a visible white pile, you have applied too much, and insects will detect the pile and walk around it. A barely visible dusting that forces insects to walk through it rather than avoid it is the correct application. Leave treatments in place for a minimum of 14 days before disturbing them. For outdoor perimeter applications, reapply after rain, because water temporarily neutralizes the cutting geometry until the powder dries. What happens next changes everything once you understand the compounding effect of this approach, because unlike a chemical spray that leaves your walls clean and your insect population reduced but not eliminated, diatomaceous earth placed in the dark structural gaps where insects breed and transit creates a permanent barrier that intercepts every new insect that enters that space, eliminating entire reproductive cycles rather than just the visible population. A woman in Tennessee documented eliminating a 2-year cockroach infestation in her apartment within 3 weeks using food-grade diatomaceous earth and a $5 duster after spending more than $2,000 over 2 years on professional chemical treatments that suppressed the infestation for a few weeks at a time before it returned to full strength. That difference between suppression and elimination is the difference between a product designed to solve your problem and a product designed to maintain your dependency on the service that sells it to you. And now you understand the full architecture of why this powder disappeared. It was not inadequate. It was not dangerous. It was not replaced by something more effective. It was erased from the consumer landscape because it solved the problem completely, affordably, and permanently. And a permanent solution to a problem is the most commercially dangerous product that can exist in an economy built on repeat transactions. The diatoms that built those glass shells in ancient lakes had no idea what they were creating. They were simply living and dying the way living things do, leaving behind exactly the structure their biology required. 30 million years later, that structure cuts through insect exoskeletons with the same efficiency it always did, indifferent to market share, quarterly earnings, or the regulatory frameworks built around protecting them. The pesticide industry spent decades and billions ensuring you would never make the connection between the white powder in a hardware store bag and the solution sitting in geological deposits beneath every continent on Earth. You have made that connection now. Subscribe to Hidden Hacks if you want to keep finding the knowledge the industry buried under decades of expensive alternatives, because the next discovery is already waiting.